Hey everyone, this is the Mr. Geopolitics channel, and today is July the 2nd, and we're going to be covering the recent events in Ukraine. So first of all, the good news. The good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess you could say. So the good news for the Ukrainians is Snake Island right here, just on the southwestern tip of Ukrainian territory, Snake Island. The infamous Snake Island. We're gonna just get rid of these and zoom in right here. And zooming in on the island, you can see it's actually a tiny little island. But it was strategically important enough for the Russians to have taken it initially. But I mean, it's basically 500 by 500 meters, right? Like, it's tiny. But the Russians took it, and the Ukrainians kept bombing it repeatedly, again and again, using drones, artillery, rockets. And reportedly, in a recent attack, the Ukrainians used the Caesar artillery system that has been provided by France, and they used some of their Soviet-era rocket systems, and they saturated the airspace. And the Russians reportedly had air defense systems like the Tor and the Panzer, short to medium range air defense systems on the site, on the island, but it wasn't enough. Because those systems are not really meant to be used for to stop artillery. For that, you would need something like the Iron Dome. But basically, it is what it is. And at the end of the day, the Russians, in the morning, apparently after the night raid, the Russian soldiers, they got on their speedboats and took off from the island. And then the Russian Defense Ministry put out a statement in which they stated that basically that their soldiers had completed their mission and that they were leaving the island for the sake of a goodwill gesture. They were claiming it's a goodwill gesture to prove to the world that they're not stopping Ukrainian grain shipments. And now they're saying it's up to the Ukrainians. So the Russians are claiming it's a goodwill gesture, but most analysts aren't really buying it. I mean, it's obvious when you look at the map. It's obvious what happened. I mean, it's a little island. There's limited space where you can put, where you can have entrenchments, or you can even put air defense systems on the site. There's just very limited space, and the Ukrainians have all this area where they can bomb it from, right? So all this entire coast, right, about 50 kilometers or so in the close range, about 50 kilometers, 30 miles in the close range that they can just bomb the island from. And then, of course, they could even bomb it from over here, 60 kilometers. It's doable, right? 58 kilometers, 40 miles. Yeah, it's doable for some of the rocket systems, missile systems they possess. So, and I mean, this island is so tiny that basically any decent medium range missile with a decent payload would pretty much, you hit it and it's toast. So the Russians basically, I think what happened is they undertook a risk assessment, and they decided that it just wasn't worth it in terms of manpower, in terms of the equipment they had lost. If you remember, more than a month ago, the Moskva, the flagship of the Russian Baltic Fleet, was destroyed while patrolling the area. A Ukrainian missile, reportedly a Neptune missile, but now they're saying that it could have been a foreign-provided missile as well. It hit the Moskva and the Moskva sank. So, yeah, the Russians have sacrificed quite a bit for this island, but it's geographically isolated, and as long as the Russians don't control the coast, it's not really worth it for them. So it is what it is. It's definitely a propaganda win for the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians haven't really landed anything on the island yet. They haven't tried as of yet. Basically, when the Russians withdrew, afterwards they bombed their own equipment, and then after that the Ukrainians bombed the remaining equipment. So it just is what it is, right? Anyways, if we look at the report on this site, we see there's footage from a TB2 drone that struck the island after the Russians had already left. And the Russians had already bombed their own equipment, but there was some equipment remaining, so the Ukrainians finished off the job for them. So I guess the TB2 drones are still flying around somewhere. Some analysts didn't believe that they were still that there were many left, but I guess there are still a few lying around. Anyway, so that's the good news for the Ukrainians. But now if we look at the big picture, you see that the Russians are completely and ruthlessly bombarding Ukraine with artillery, rockets, missiles, you name it. They're just bombing the heck out of Ukraine, all along the front lines, right? And right here we notice, if you look at this right here, the Ukrainians have taken, where it says Russian troops left Ivanivka village in Kherson region. So the Ukrainians are claiming that the Russian troops left the village. So I don't know if the Russians withdrew or they were forced to or whatever. But I mean, this is not a big deal. I mean, in this region, a village here, a village there, I mean, it's not of any consequence really. The most important event that is occurring right now is in the Donbas region. Okay, so right here is the Donbas. All right, and you see in this area circled, labeled in dark red, was the area of the Donbas that was controlled by the Russians at the beginning of the war. Now they control all the area in red, right? So anyways, we're gonna zoom in on the main event. Enough sideshows. So basically the Russians have more or less taken Lysychansk. I mean, they're inside the city center, and that has been confirmed. This map doesn't really show how the city is encircled. I don't think this map is pro-Ukrainian, but it's not showing the full picture because essentially the Russians they crossed the river up from the north here at Privilia, and they took a bunch of these settlements. But according to Russian analysts, they've actually come all the way down and into the city, and they've actually completely surrounded and encircled the city. All of this happened really quickly. Here, I'll just show you this. Russian troops and media are in central Lysychansk. So those are, you can see that's the Chechen flag, the flag the Chechens use. So Chechen troops that are fighting for the Russians are in the center of the city, and Russian troops are in there, and the media are there as well. So It's been confirmed. The coordinates are right there. But this map doesn't really show the full picture. I don't believe it does. I don't blame them. I mean, things have changed rather quickly. But just about a week ago, a few days ago, Severodonetsk, the Russians were they were fighting for Severodonetsk, and they controlled about 80% of it. And at the Azot chemical plant, reports say that about 500, or some reports say 1,000 Ukrainians were surrounded at the Azot chemical plant. But anyways, the Russians controlled 80% of the city, and but all of a sudden what happened was, see, the Russians had control over this area, Popasna, and this was a bulge that was sticking out. But these areas here, Zolote, Herske, they were under Ukrainian control. And then what happened is they got encircled. The Russians basically, they crossed over into this area from the south, and basically they encircled the area you see here, Zolote and Herske. They basically encircled it, and the Ukrainians, they either had to surrender or flee. And once that happened, basically, let me just take care of this right here. Basically, once that happened, the entire area fell apart. So sorry guys, I'm just going to zoom back in. So essentially, once the Russians expanded their front and the southern regions fell apart, then the troops at Severodonetsk, they retreated. And I'm not even sure how they were able to retreat, because according to both sides, all the bridges had been destroyed. And you can see there's a river in between Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. But I don't know, I guess you can swim, or I guess infantry were still able to cross the bridges. And in large part, it seems like the Russians just, they simply allowed the Ukrainians to just leave, because we know that at the Azot chemical plant, we know that the Ukrainians were surrounded. We know from reports that they were completely surrounded. So how did 500 to 1,000 Ukrainians just sneak away when they were surrounded? I'm guessing the Russians just let them escape, and it's like letting the chicken out of the coop, right? I mean, if you take 1,000 prisoners, you have to feed those prisoners. You have to take care of those prisoners. And despite what you hear in a lot of Western media, the Russians, from what I've seen in reports and in videos, they're to a large extent taking care of their prisoners. They're feeding them, clothing them, they're just taking care of them. And anyways, 1,000 prisoners, you have to feed 1,000 prisoners, but if those prisoners flee, imagine how that makes the other troops in the area guarding the other regions feel, right? They might be new recruits, they might not have that much experience, and then they see the more experienced veterans that have just fought this huge battle fleeing in their direction, and fleeing past their direction maybe. So then it creates a huge headache, because now the Ukrainians have to feed these troops, they have to snap some sense into them, or they have to punish them, or figure out what to do with them, right? So oftentimes when throughout history, rather than taking prisoners, letting the troops escape, it leads to like kind of a House of Cards effect, kind of. And I think that's what the Russians are hoping for, and they've somewhat achieved it, because again, the map, I don't think it looks like this, because according to the Institute for the Study of War, which is mostly pro-Ukrainian. This is their version of events, right? So you can see the same region, Lysychansk, and you can see that according to them, this is from July 1st, the Russians have a, there's this little ball sticking out here. They've made more, they have more, according to this map, the Russians have more of a foothold in Lysychansk. And now I'm going to show you the Rybar map. This is a pro-Ukrainian open source analyst on Telegram. And even on the Rybar map, this is from 2 days ago, and you can see according to this, the Russians have much more of a foothold, and they're even going towards Severodonetsk. They're closer to Severodonetsk. So essentially, I mean, a really good source is the Defense Politics Asia map. You can check him out if you want. He's a really good source. And I mean, there's no denying it now. Lysychansk is on the verge of falling, and it is encircled. The front probably looks something more like this, right? At this point, I mean, it probably looks something like closer to something like this, right? It's encircled, and the Ukrainians that are, in the areas that are still remaining, some of them are reportedly fighting, but I mean, their best chance is either to break through, but even if they break through, they might not make it through the Russian areas where the Russians troops are, where the Russians have probably set up defensive lines. They might not make it through, or they might very well have to surrender. So that's pretty much it. I mean, Lysychansk is pretty much a done deal. A few days ago, when I put out the other video, I also said that Severodonetsk was a done deal, and it was just a matter of time. Well, Lysychansk is also now pretty much, it's just a matter of time. Now, what comes next? What comes next is whatever the Russians want basically comes next. I mean, the next areas where there's gonna be fighting, and the next areas of interest are going to be Severodonetsk, I believe, and Bakhmut here in the south. Bakhmut is very significant, and the Russians are not even that far away. I mean, from the city center, they're like 7 miles away, 12 kilometers, right? And once they take that, they can go up this road, the M103, and they can go for Sloviansk and then Kramatorsk. For those who have been keeping track, analysts have said from months ago that the battle for the Donbas would all come down to Kramatorsk, and I think that's probably that assessment is correct, because the Russians, I mean, according to all the reports, they're outnumbered on the field in terms of manpower, but the Russians they just have more firepower. They have more artillery, especially more artillery. They have more multiple launch rocket systems like the Tor, and they've changed their tactics since the first phase of the war. They're basically conducting more reconnaissance, moving slowly, and when they're finding where the Ukrainians, when they find concentrations of Ukrainian manpower, when they find bases, ammo depots, oil facilities, supply lines. They bombed them. They bombed them with rockets, with artillery, especially missiles, you name it. I mean, recently they've been bombing the heck out of Odessa. They've been bombing Odessa into oblivion. And this has all been over Snake Island, but again, the Russians pretty much retreated from Snake Island, or withdrew, however you want to look at it. And so that was, you know, a strategic victory for the Ukrainians. More of a propaganda victory, I would say. But I mean, if you look at the main event, the Russians are winning. And once they basically take Lysychansk and their surrounding area to the north, what's going to happen is that they're going to clear the area. They're going to secure the area of mines and, you know, rebuild, establish some kind of government, establish some kind of life for the civilians. And afterwards, the front line will pretty much be somewhere here. And I mean, the Russians, they might press ahead, but it might take a few weeks for them to reorganize. But at this point, the Ukrainians are fleeing, and they're fleeing fast. And the Russians might decide to hit the iron while it's hot. But it's important for troops to reorganize as well. And this is going to be I mean, after they take Lysychansk, after Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, all of the area that has been claimed by the Luhansk People's Republic will basically be under the control of the Luhansk People's Republic, under the Russian separatist control. So the Ukrainians will no longer be controlling any area in the Luhansk Oblast. I read a report which said that at this point they control like 1 or 2% or something, but that's not going to be a fact in a day or two. So the front is going to, you know, look something like this. All the area to the west of this line is going to be red. And then the Russians are going to pound the Ukrainians with artillery, rockets. They're going to continue pounding Ukrainian positions, softening positions, hitting command centers, ammo depots, supply lines. Yeah, they're going to keep pounding the Ukrainians, and eventually they're going to find a weak spot, and they're going to pour in their troops. So they're going to go in for Bakhmut, or they're going to go for Severodonetsk, or they can even, now that the Ukrainians are all fleeing and they're concentrated, they're going to be concentrated more to the east. A lot of them might even flee to Sloviansk. We know that the Russians have been building up in Izium for a while. They've been building up their troops and forces in Izium. So they might even launch an attack from Izium. Right? So right now it's almost as if the Russians they're firing on all cylinders. I mean, they're continually using their overwhelming superiority in firepower to overwhelm Ukrainian positions and encircle Ukrainian positions. And once the Ukrainians get encircled, I mean, there's not much they can do, right? You know, I think in the last video there was a video that was put out by a Ukrainian conscript where he said that essentially all the professional soldiers in the Ukrainian army are either dead or injured. They're pretty much all gone. I was skeptical about that video. I was somewhat skeptical, but BBC recently released a video on their YouTube channel. You can watch it, and they go along with an elite Ukrainian unit, as they call it, and they interview one of the soldiers from that elite unit, and he says that they've sustained 80% casualty rates. So 80% casualty rates for any unit, I mean, that is completely unsustainable. We're not really hearing about the scale of casualties on the Ukrainian side in the Western media and the corporate media. We're not hearing about it. They're trying to promote the Ukrainian cause as much as possible, but when the casualty counts do come out, whether it's in a few months from now, years from now, decades from now, people are going to be appalled. People are going to be absolutely appalled at the number of casualties. I mean, at the beginning of the war, Ukraine had at least 200,000 troops in their professional army. So if most of them are gone, I mean, you're looking at casualty rates of over 100,000, and that's just horrendous. You know, that's the worst since World War II. So, anyways, yeah, you know, in one recent video, one netizen, he said something which kind of stuck with me. He said, the Ukrainians are like stone right now, and the Russians are like water. The Ukrainians, they're basically trying to cling on to territory, and they're not as fluid as the Russians are. The Russians, what they're doing is basically conducting reconnaissance, pounding Ukrainian positions, just pounding away at the Ukrainians night and day. You know, in terms of artillery, they outnumber the Ukrainians 10-1, in some areas 20-1. So they're just using that advantage in firepower and destroying, you know, Ukrainian infantry positions, destroying anywhere where they detect trenches, and you know, essentially, then they send in the troops to mop up the remains, and they're doing a good job encircling the troops, and they don't. I'm not sure. I mean, of course, the Russians have contingency plans, but I honestly think that after this, they're just going to pound at the Ukrainians, and they're going to try to advance from any direction, every direction. They're just going to poke and prod away at the Ukrainians, and when they sense an opening, they pour in like water, right? So, just like that famous Bruce Lee quote, be like water, be flexible. I mean, the Russians are pretty much, that's what they're doing. They're just biding their time, using their advantage in firepower, pounding away at the Ukrainians, and whenever they sense an opening, they go for it. They pour in their troops, and they encircle the Ukrainians. So, I mean, it is what it is, guys. If you're on the Ukrainian side, it's not a pretty picture. But anyways, that's enough for this video, and if you've watched till now, if you've watched me blab till now, thank you for watching, guys. Again, I'm new at this, so thanks for being with me. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.